150 years ago, a broken leg would probably have meant an amputation, and in about half of such cases, the patient subsequently would have died of infection. The man whose work virtually put an end to this tragic waste of human life was Lord Joseph Lister. Modern surgery, as we know it today, was not able to develop until two great hurdles had been overcome. These were the control of pain and the control of sepsis and gangrene.
Well, surgery has had checkered history. It goes back a long way, but it was not surgery that, as we think of it today. In 1846, the first big change came about in surgery when general anesthetics were first demonstrated and accepted by the public and the surgical community.
The control of infection remained unconquered when Lister began working as a surgeon in 1852. In the Edinburgh hospital where Lister worked, almost half of the patients died of infection after an operation. In some hospitals in Europe, as many as 80% died. Lister began a search for the cause of sepsis. So common, some surgeons considered it a normal part of healing.
Surgeons in general speculated on whether it was bad atmosphere, that something, if they could keep the gases away from the wounds, they would heal better. It was just unknown as to why the patients so often succumbed to terrible gangrene and hospital sepsis.
At this time, Louis Pasteur in France was working on a way to prevent spoilage of wine and milk. He discovered that it was due to unseen particles in the air called germs, which could be destroyed by heat. Learning this, Lister was also able to show that sepsis was also due to invisible germs. Pasteur had used heat and filters to eliminate germs in wine, but these techniques were not suitable for use with human flesh.
The odor of sewage was a public problem in various larger cities. In Carlisle in Scotland, they'd found that using a little carbolic acid mixed with the sewage completely eliminated the problem of odor. So he thought that this was killing bacteria, and he wanted to kill bacteria. So he used solutions of carbolic acid to treat the wounds and dress the wounds with excellent results.
Beginning in 1865, Lister used diluted carbolic acid to wash his hands, his instruments, and the bandages used in dressing wounds. He went on to develop a carbolic acid spray to prevent airborne germs entering wounds during surgery. After more than a year of using and refining these techniques, Lister had sufficient data to show that his antiseptic methods were a safe and effective alternative to amputation in many cases. Recognition of Lister's early research came in 1860 when he was made a Fellow of the Royal Society. There was a slow recognition of his work, and by 1879 Joseph Lister's principle of antiseptic surgery had gained much acceptance in Europe. It was the principles of antiseptic surgery that were introduced in the emerging Victoria medical community by Dr. John Chapman Davy during the 1890s. Victoria was now in a building boom. The long-awaited Pacific Railway was completed and stretched across Canada from Montreal to Cole Harbour, Vancouver. The Provincial Royal Jubilee Hospital had opened in May 1890 on the outskirts of the city of Victoria, and this brand-new 40-bed hospital was deemed to be an excellent facility of its time. It did not have an operating room designated in the plan. Operations were to take place in a private room at the end of a surgery ward. This modern facility was destined for further development, and in 1894 the Provincial Royal Jubilee Hospital Board received a donation of $2,000 from the estate of Joseph D. Pemberton, a wealthy Victoria citizen, pioneer colonial surveyor, and member of the First Assembly of the Colony of Vancouver Island. The hospital board was thrust into a heated debate as the community and medical doctors argued about the best option for the hospital expansion. Dr. John Sebastian Helmken wanted a maternity unit, while Dr. Davy thought an operating room would best serve the community. In 1895, augmented by a further donation of $1,500 from J.D. Pemberton's widow, Teresa Jane Pemberton, the board pursued planning for a maternity unit, but they soon found it was impossible to construct this building for the sum of $3,500. The board moved a motion to proceed drawing up plans for an operating theater. Modern advances in 19th century medicine helped to explain the attitudes of the doctors at the Provincial Royal Jubilee Hospital in 1895. Dr. John Davy was the chief medical officer at the hospital and had studied the fundamentals of Lord Lister's principles of antisepsis. He quickly learned about the dramatic changes in surgical practice already taking place and the remarkable reduction in the mortality rate. Dr. Davy was the driving force behind the plan for an operating room to be built. In 1896, the plans for the operating room were designed by Dr. Davy and drawings completed by architect John Teague. The separate building was to be joined to the hospital by a 50-foot corridor. The operating room itself was octagonal in shape and 24 feet in diameter. Attached to the rear of the operating room was a sterilizing room. Its basement housed 2 furnaces, one for heat and one for a source of hot water for sterilizing instruments. The plastered and painted walls, mosaic tiles, large windows, and heat pipes were all designed for easy cleaning and disinfection after surgery. Light was provided on both sides, and this was vital in these pre-electric days. In May of 1896, the Pemberton Memorial Operating Room was finally completed. Although the Pemberton Memorial Operating Room was typical of operating rooms built or refurbished in the 1890s, its design as a nearly freestanding operating room with no provisions for observers was unique in Canada. In 1897, the father of modern surgery and president of the Royal Society, Lord Lister, visited Victoria and the Royal Jubilee Hospital and gave his approval of the Pemberton Memorial Operating Room. Dr. Davy's ongoing surgical skills and application of Lord Lister's antiseptic principles led to his recognition as the first man to perform surgical operations of any magnitude in the Pacific Northwest. The operating room was used for all surgery until approximately 1925.
When the operating room no longer was used as an operating room because of additional surgical facilities built in the main hospital building, which had gone up in the mid-1920s, the use of the operating room evolved. It was part of the radiology department, which was a new science after 1925. And it had various uses, none of which actually structurally changed the design and the features of the operating room that had been built in for its original surgical purpose.
The building was finally vacated in the mid-1980s. Demolition was prevented by the Victoria Medical Society's request to have the building designated as a provincial heritage building. Victoria Medical Society agreed to restore Pemberton Operating Room as their centennial project in 1995. The Society obtained the services of architect John Kay to meet 2 primary objectives: to preserve the heritage building as a public medical museum and restore it to its late 1890s appearance, complete with medical instruments and furnishings. Also, to add a new addition which could house the VMS library of medical history, collected artifacts, and support services. Incorporating elements of both 19th and 20th century design, the Pemberton Operating Room therefore represents a key transitional moment in the history of hospital design in Canada.
I think the real interesting part of that building is its context between what was and what is now, and the fact that this significant medical establishment has grown up around this little building. I think another part of the context is, of course, the chapel. I think the 2 buildings, both of which were the result of donations by the Pemberton family, I think they both express a lot about what medicine was and its aspirations within the community.
Today, on the grounds of the Royal Jubilee Hospital, the Pemberton Operating Room is a rare surviving example of a surgical facility from a time when hospitals were being transformed from primarily charitable to scientific institutions. It's the oldest remaining building on the grounds of the Royal Jubilee Hospital. It remains the only 19th century freestanding operating room of its kind in Canada. In 2006, the Pemberton Memorial Operating Room was designated a National Historic Site of Canada.
All in all, I think given the significance of its place in BC medical history, its design, its addressing of these environmental issues, and its current condition, I think it's a very significant building.
The Victoria Medical Society, along with Victoria Medical Heritage Society, formed in 2004, are committed to completing the restoration of the Pemberton Operating Room and to realize the educational potential for healthcare workers and the public.
I think the contrast between the little Pemberton Operating Room and the large hospital complex for those who have had to experience surgery and have been through the new facilities, the contrast is remarkable.
Preserving the past, envisioning the future. Let's give our past a future.